To make our game, our next game's core elements, we need to make it so that we can give our asteroids, or comets in my case, some direction, and make it so that they kind of are a little bit randomized. And then we also want to make it so that whenever a bullet collides with the asteroid or comet, it will destroy itself, the bullet will destroy itself. The asteroid will then either be destroyed or will split into multiple other smaller asteroids. So let's start with the first part. The first part is going to be making it so our asteroid can move. So we need to create a script for our comet. I'm going to call it Comet. And then I'm going to put it on at least one of my comets for now. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some things up here that I don't need just at the moment. I'm just going to leave these two guys, my big asteroids, and I'll apply just to them for now. Make sure to go back and apply those back to the prefab because I want every comet that spawns to come in and have that script. But for right now, I'm just applying them to the big ones. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have these comets and going to get access to their rigid bodies to create speed and direction. A lot like we did with the player, except instead of an input from the keyboard, it's going to be set to a random amount of force and whatnot. So I'm going to go in here and real quick, I'm going to add a rigid body 2D because I know it's going to need it. We don't want it to have any gravity. We don't want it to have any angular drag. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that for all of them because I know that they're all going to need it, just so we can determine how quickly it moves. We have to be able to access this component to give it some physics. Boop, and boop. Okay. So all of these have rigid bodies now, which is perfect. I need those. And in our Visual Studio script here, we need to set up some variables. First of all, we need to set up our speed variables and our spin variable, and we need to set up a way to access that rigid body component on the comet. So for our speed, we're going to use max speed because we want to select a random speed between the maximum and the minimum, and we can just take the maximum and set that equal to negative. So we're just going to need one variable here for max speed. So serialize field, float, max speed, and then we're going to have another one, serialize field. And this one's going to be for our spin. Now, you might already be thinking in the back of your mind, how did we create speed and how did we create rotation with our player, which is a good way to be thinking because we're going to use the same kind of methods here. So in our player movement, we got access to the player's rigid body and gave it add relative force and add torque to create its movement. We're going to do the same thing with our asteroid. So we need to get our rigid body in here. So it is of type rigid body 2D. Call it Comet rigid, kind of like we called our other one the player rigid body. This is the Comet rigid body. And that's good enough for now. In the start, as soon as these comets are created, we want to give them their randomized movement. Now, for now, I'm going to put it in start. I will probably factor this out into its own method later, just for the sake of cleanness, but for right now, I'm going to put it in the start method because it is starting with these things. So first, we need to give it a vector 2, and we want that vector 2 to be the speed. So we want to give our comet speed, essentially. So new vector 2, and we're going to use this really cool thing called random.range. Random.range, you kind of also used a little bit previously with the random numbers. So we're going to select a random number between our max speed, negative max speed, and our positive max speed. So that's basically just saying pick a number anywhere between whatever we say this number is going to be and the opposite of that number. And then random dot range negative max speed and positive max speed. Why am I doing it this way? Because we have to give it an x speed and a y. It's a vector, so it's looking for an x and a y. So I need this is the x component and this is the y component, but they are both going to be randomly determined based on this one variable we've set up. So we've set up one variable that is very flexible. And then we're going to set our float spin, because we want our comet to spin, but it doesn't have to be a vector 2 because it's just going to spin around itself. And that's going to be another random.range. Random.range, and then we're going to use negative max spin, just like we did with max speed, and max spin. Perfect. Now, like we did with our player, so again, if we look back over at our player, we took our rigid body and then applied those numbers that we've just created. So once we got the input and it was basically 1, 0, or -1, we added some logic to it that was constant. This time we're going to use our random number and add our rigid body force to it, which I hope makes sense. So under here, we're going to use our Comet rigid. And this time we're just going to add force. It doesn't need to be relative to anything because it is just randomly selected and it doesn't really matter if it's going in any particular direction. And then we're going to grab the Comet rigid and we're going to add torque, because that's how we spun our player, correct? So in this, basically we're saying grab the rigid body, select a random speed and a random spin, and just go for it. So let's see, in Unity, let's go ahead and set up some information. So we did put our Comet script on both our big brown and our big red, in my case. So we need to set a max speed and a max spin. So let's, I don't know, 100? That's probably fine, right? Max spin 100. And I need to drag, make sure you are on the prefab for this, because we want it to be the, every time it comes in, it draws from its own script. So I just drag up the rigid body from its own script into the Comet rigid body. So big red, let's let this one, for the sake of testing, we're going to give it higher numbers to see how we feel about that, and drag in the rigid body. So that's all the stuff we set in the last one. If I hit play, they should start going in random directions at random speeds and random spins. So this one's spinning like crazy fast, this one's spinning really slow, which is fun because that one, let me zoom out, this one had a higher number, but it randomly picked a smaller number. Now if I hit play again, it should go in a different direction because it's randomly selecting it with different speeds. Perfect. So you can already tell that we've got some great functionality here. There is this bullet just sitting in the middle here, and just delete that. Okay, so we've got some good randomness. Now we need to make it so that our comets will wrap around the screen so they're not constantly just disappearing off the edges, right? And just like before on our other one, we're just going to scavenge from our player the screen wrap method. So I'm going to grab private void screen wrap and go over to my comet and throw it underneath the update, call it from the update, like so, and then we need, obviously, our variables here. That's not the right one, player. Our variables for screen height and screen width. I'm going to grab those, put them over here, and we'll just put them right there. This one has a header. These don't yet. You can put one on there if you want. And I'm going to show you a neat trick for renaming things. So it's very tricky to rename stuff and not accidentally mistype something. So there is a very handy shortcut that Visual Studio has where if you select the variable that you're looking to rename, and then you hold Control, and then you tap R and then R again, it'll let you rename this. So see how it highlighted everything? You can take that and go ahead and say, so this is not player position. We're looking for a comet position, right? So if I rename this Comet Pause, all of them renamed themselves at the same time. And then I hit enter and it saved all of them. So they are all now saved and ready to go and fixed. So now this is relevant to itself. And I'm going to go ahead and go into my bullet script because I know I did not do that here. And this is called player pause. The screen wrap, I believe we decided we actually didn't need these, and I was just being silly before whenever I was doing things kind of backwards. So I'm going to comment these things out and double check that everything's still working before I get rid of them. But go into Unity. Now we need to set up some variables, right? Because our screen wrap needs a height and a width, because if we don't set these, then things are going to not be great for us. So I'm actually just going to go to my player script. It's not perfect, but I'm just going to steal 5.7 and 9.5 as my numbers. They're not going to be accurate because my comets are not the same size as my player. But for right now, I don't really care about that. I just want to put it in here for testing purposes. So now if I hit play, well, that died, but that one, you saw it. It went through and came back perfect. I'm going to move Big Brown further away from me so I can test out my bullet script a little bit to make sure it's still working the way it should. Those guys ran into each other and bounced off in random directions. My bullet script still works as it should, so perfect. Everything is going according to plan. So I don't need these on the bullet script, so I'm going to delete them. I was pretty sure I did not need them, but, you know, it's always good to double check by commenting something out first before you actually remove a whole chunk of code. So now that we have this Comet kind of functionality figured out, let's go ahead and add that Comet script to our small comets because we need it to have those eventually. And let's go ahead and add some numbers here. So I don't know, max speed 300 because they're little and they probably move faster because they're small. And drag in their rigid body component. 5.7 and 9.5, I believe, were my numbers. This one, say it'll move 250 and spin of 250. These numbers are probably going to change, but I'm putting them in for now just for testing purposes. So everything is set up the way it will be ready to go for me to do tweaking and testing later on. Okay, so our bullet. Let's look at this guy. He has a collider, and it is a trigger. So we need to make it so our Comet is checking for a trigger, entering it, and if so, to do something. And it's hard for us to tell it exactly like how to check for what is hitting it. Because if a player hits it, we don't necessarily want it to do the same thing as if a bullet hits it. Does that make sense? So we need to take we're going to do a new thing. We're going to use this section right here at the top of our inspector called tags. And we're going to create a new tag just for the bullet and use that for our trigger to check and see if it is a bullet, a player, what it is. So we're going to add tag, and it says list is empty. I'm going to call this bullet, all lowercase, and that's fine. And now I'm going to go back to my bullet and change the tag to bullet. So now every bullet that is created will have this tag. And then I'm going to come into Visual Studio, and we're checking for it on our Comet. So do I want this? I'm going to put screen wrap smaller so it's out of my way. And I'm going to put this above that because I feel like it's more important in the code and I want it higher up. So we need to create a void on trigger enter 2D. And we want to say if it's this thing, then do some stuff. So in our case, this time our if statement is going to be if other dot compare tag, and then parentheses, quotation marks, bullet. So we're saying if the other thing that I've run into is a bullet, then we will do some stuff. So right now, we want to destroy the other dot game object. So the other thing that we ran into. And this is giving me some errors, so I'm not sure. The name other does not exist in current context. I know this works. Is it capital O? No, that's not it. Other dot compare tag bullet should be working. I'm going to double check this and I will be right back. All right, so I'm back from the future. I figured it out. I forgot to do one silly little thing and say other in the Collider 2D other. We're looking for the other object whenever we have that happen. So whenever the other thing hits it, we're going to check for the tag bullet and then destroy the thing that hits it, which in this case, if it's the bullet, it will destroy the bullet. So let's double check that that is working before we do anything else. Now I'm just going to shoot out a bunch of bullets and hope that one hits. Dang it. Nope. Okay. Play again. Surely one will run into an asteroid at some point, right? Aha, yes, okay. So it ran into, you probably missed it if you weren't watching, but it ran into one right here, and it destroyed the bullet. So it's doing what it's supposed to do. So now we need to make it so that whenever we have this happen, we do this other thing, which is create more asteroids if it's a large asteroid, and reset the expectations. So we need to make some more information up here. I'm going to put it under here. We need to make a serialized field. We are looking for a game or an integer called comet size. Actually, let's do a game object first. Game object, we're going to call this small comet that we will drag in the inspector, and then we're also going to have I don't know if this needs to be serialized. I'm going to serialize it for now just to be safe. It's going to be an integer, and yes, I need to have that. Okay, so an integer called comet size. It's going to be something that we set on our inspector that tells us to check for the size of the comet. So, if it runs into a bullet, destroy the other game object, and while you're destroying the other game object, we're going to check for some other stuff. So if our comet size is equal to, size, let's say 2. So I'm going to have two sizes of comets, right? One is going to be the little one, and 2 is going to be the bigger one. It just makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. We're going to make more small comets, and I'm just going to put that comment in there as a placeholder. Else if the first statement isn't true, then when you're going to come down to this other statement, this comet size is equal to 1, which means it's our small comet. We will add points and I don't know, destroy the comet. Actually, we'll probably destroy the comet outside of this because we always want to destroy the comet. But basically, we'll add points whenever you destroy the small comet. So for right now, it's got placeholder text in it. So we need to make it so that we instantiate the small comets at the location of the large comet whenever it gets destroyed. So, by the way I said that, you probably could figure out this code. We're just going to instantiate a small comet at the transform dot position and the transform dot rotation. And then I'm going to do this kind of the little bit sloppy, lazy way. I'm just going to copy this and paste it. We could do this another way. In the past, whenever we've added to our score, I believe we used a for loop. So we could have done that. But for right now, this will work. It will spawn 2 comets that are the small comets. And I'm going to save all that. Pop over into Unity. And I'm going to look at our comets because we've got some more information to fill in now. So this is a small red comet, so it's going to be size 1. And small comet needs a game object. It doesn't have that game object, but it's not going to be spawning anything, so I'm going to leave that, and I don't think it will cause a problem. Then big comet's going to be size 2, and this is big red, so I'm going to drag small red from down here, not from up here, because I want it to make a copy of the original, into that. And I want my big brown to be size 2, and I want it to spawn small brown comets. Okay. So let us see if this works. Just going to shoot out a bunch of bullets. Hope that one lands. Surely one will. Yep, that spawned 2 other little comets. So I'm going to take my big red comet. I'm going to move it right here. So it's like in line of sight for my player, and see if I can get this on screen a little better. Now it spawned definitely more than 2, and that's because I didn't destroy the comet before doing anything else. So every time a bullet hit it, it kept making more things. So we need to add at the bottom here a destroy game object because we want it to destroy itself so it doesn't keep doing this. So let's come over here, let Unity compile. I may have hit that like 3 times. Yep, I did. Okay. It created 2. They kind of both flew off in the same direction, but we're getting somewhere, right? So we're going to tweak and play with this stuff a little bit more as we go on, making sure that our stuff has all of the, oh, you know, what'll make this a lot better is, well, no, these have colliders. I'm not sure. So we're going to mess with this a little bit more, but right now we have the logic in place where you destroy a comet, it creates 2 more comets, and that is exactly what we want. So we're going to keep working on this whole situation in the next video.